almost afternoon. I was thinking about how to introduce this particular topic, and I had various ideas on my mind. I realized that the initial talks today have actually exposed some of the concepts that I'm trying to point out in this presentation. That's going to make it easier for me, because 30 minutes gets pretty short when you talk about the model and its stages. So I'll jump straight into it. A very quick background, look at the 4 high maturity process areas, and another aspect that did get affected when version 1.3 came out, and that was the disabling of the high capability in the CMMI. I'll call it high capability in a manner. The model 1.3 was released in November 2010. It was upgraded with 2 major planned objectives. One is to improve the harmonization across the constellations, and again, of course, also address improvements and changes. And then secondly, clarify the understanding of high maturity, which is the reason why I would like to discuss it here. What SCI says, the process areas were significantly improved, which is true in a sense, and they reflect the industry best practices. There was a fair bit of participation of the industry. One process area got renamed and enhanced at maturity level 5. In a manner, creating a slightly bigger jump between maturity level 4 and 5. And then the generic goals for capability levels 4 and 5 were eliminated. Now that's the simple part. What happened was, with the release of 1.2, SCI was still trying to define what is the interpretation for high maturity practices. And so, by 2007 and 2008, in fact, I would say March 2008, SEPG, SCI had a presentation on high maturity practices, which has sort of become the benchmark of what would be the expectations. That's a part of the training material that we were expected to use when we taught our basic team members on what do we mean by high maturity. So there's 2 parts of this transition. One is a movement from 1.2 to 1.3, which can have its significant changes. And the second one, which is a smaller movement from the published interpretations, which was in the SCI presentations, into the model with some more things. So I'm going to quickly highlight the things that have changed, presuming that you are, to an extent, or reasonably familiar with the 2008 presentation made by SCI, and therefore the common expectations of the model. This particular colloquium was also started keeping in mind that the expectations have changed, and therefore the implementations need to be different. One basic change when we moved from 1.2 to what I can say the SCI presentation was a change in the central themes. Till that time, most organizations would believe that if they had baselines, they had control charts, and possibly an SPC on 1 or 2 sub-processes which they believe were linked or critical for their final deliverable, they had implemented high maturity practices. This is no longer the central theme of high maturity. Just moved away. These things are useful, yes, but what is needed is getting some business value and determining business value through the usage of process performance models, which has also been talked of in the presentations, in fact all of the presentations in the morning. And this needs to be supported by a good understanding and use of the inherent variation in processes and combinations of processes. I'm going to show some parts of the practices, the practice statements, as well as the goal statements were relevant. I'm using a color coding. The reddish colors are the ones which were deleted from 1.2. Text which was in 1.2 and deleted from it, not deleted from 1.3, I'm sorry. The white part is the one which is introduced in 1.3, and yellows are some highlights I put in otherwise, and there's a blue which is basically the 1.2 text. We'll start with the first process area. The organizational process performance has become now a very important process area for doing work. It's a central theme, because that is the one that produces our process performance models supported by process performance baselines. So if you look at, the practices got rearranged by and large. If you see, most of the text is blue. And as an instructor, I'm also an instructor for the CMMI besides an appraiser. It was always a challenge trying to explain what came first and what came later, especially when the sequence isn't looking right. So I find this to be far more useful. We start talking about establishing objectives first before we start talking about doing other things. There's an improvement in the model also, and that is explicit mention of having traceability to business objectives for your quantitative objectives for quality and process performance. And this is done not just at the time of goal setting, but also when you start identifying processes or other things correlated to achieving objectives. So not only do we say we have correlations, we have introduction of traceability. The definition of measurements, at least at the statement level, doesn't have a major change. However, the analysis and publication of process performance baselines has just emphasized the fact that you don't have to do a baseline for the end results, but you have baselines for processes including individual ones. The final practice remains unchanged, which is about process performance models. If you look inside, some additional things have been shared in the model. It talks about process performance baselines and process performance models being built at different levels. They definitely are candidates at the organization level, but they could be also done for individual projects or even service lines or groups of projects, particular groupings which are useful. These different levels of models would still use guidance within the OPP as the basis for developing, maintaining, releasing the baselines of models. The definition of the process performance model is not too different from what was released in the SEI slides, but is definitely significantly enhanced from what was there in the version 1.2. So things that are being emphasized. If you want to model, we don't just want to have a forecast. We want actually the ability to evaluate alternatives. What if we change something? So related to the work happening, see if things will change, and therefore figure out what could be a better combination. And as we do these combinations, what we'd like to have is variation of factors which will provide insight into what is going on now and could be related to predicted results. It would be good to have some of them to be controllable, because that's when we can take actions now to achieve results if we are not going on track. The kind of models, statistical, probabilistic, simulation-based, which are doing these relationships. These models could be individual models or could be combinations. In fact, you could have detailed submodels coming together and feeding a bigger model, which will help you predict performance for your work. Now, this particular set of information also became the base on which the rest of the high maturity practices are implemented for process areas relating to quantitative project management or the maturity level 5 process areas. Little lower, one level lower inside the process area. Specific practice 1.3, which hadn't changed too much, which was talking more about measurement systems, the operational definitions for measures, talks about not only measuring a single attribute for a sub-process, but doing a collection of attributes so that you can view the process performance in different ways and therefore improve your understanding. In terms of baseline releases, which is specific practice,